So welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, for a new session. And we are today honored to have the Chandaria family. Mr. Paras, it's an honor to have you here. What an impressive portfolio and what an impressive history you have with the family, fifth generation, I understand. It's a story that I'd love to hear and I'd truly appreciate. You could give me a bit of background of the family, how it started, and how is it that it runs today.
Thank you, Dr. Adil. Pleasure to be here on your podcast and to be back in Dubai. The family started 100 years ago when my great-great-grandfather moved from India, from Gujarat to Kenya. So our business started out in East Africa. And he was a farmer in India, struggling to make ends meet. So he decided to, against the wishes of his father, who I think found out much later that he'd actually left to go to Kenya to start this business. He first worked in a convenience store, and eventually he bought the store, and then he started in manufacturing. And in those days, in order to hedge bets, people would invest, friends would invest in each other's businesses, and that way they would de-risk. So they did a bit of that. Eventually, business was successful. He took over his own business entirely. And we grew in steel and aluminium processing in East Africa. Then we went from Kenya to Tanzania, Uganda, across East Africa, then it's South Africa, West Africa, at various parts of the world. The family's a large family, fifth generation, so there's many guys working together. We were still, the constitution of the family was very old-fashioned, so in today's terminology, girls were not allowed to work in the business, daughters were not allowed to work in the business. So it was just the guys. So we were 15 guys working together across generations. And the businesses, over time we got into were things like garment hangers, where we're the largest in the world, a company called Mainetti. So we produce in 32 countries. We supply every major retailer in the world. We have a business called Techno, which is insulated panel, that we do again in about 10 different countries, global business, tertiary packaging, then telecom ducting, blown fiber solutions, where we have a plant in the UAE. About 10 years ago, I decided to spend more time in a tech business that we have. So we're active.
Is that part of the family business?
Everything that we do has been always for the family.
Amazing.
So we're all entrepreneurs. We all love building businesses. I built small retail businesses. I put theme parks in India in the edutainment space. The Kidzania concept, which is well known in Dubai. I have the franchise for India, so we did that. And to de-risk it, brought in a movie star, a Bollywood guy as a partner, who's also well known here, so Shah Rukh Khan.
Yes,
he's a partner in that. Then last 10 years, really more focus on technology.
Okay.
For me personally,
you do a lot on AI and.
That's right. So we've been doing AI for a long time, but we do everything in digital transformation. So we start from understanding our customers, their problems, then using technology to improve and find a better outcome for them, and all the way through the system. So UI, UX, or the interface, then analytics, AI.
Is that out of India or in Africa?
Today we have over 30,000 people in the business. More than 20,000 are in India. The rest are in America, Europe, and Asia, various parts of the world. We're about to do something in this part of the world, so I'll keep you posted.
I'll be interested.
Yeah, we found a good partner locally, so if, as they say here, inshallah, if everything goes well, we'll have a JV out here. And in Saudi, we've also been looking at starting recently, so.
Yeah, a lot of activities are happening there too.
It's a very exciting part of the world, and we're super happy. It's a gap we had.
I understand that you have a golden visa here also.
That's right.
Come in and out.
So it was one of your old companies, JAFSA.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So I was sitting in the free trade zone looking at the ducting business, an opportunity for them, and the chap in charge of the business said to me, "Do you have a golden visa? Do you come to Dubai often? And you've been coming here for years or whatever?" So I said, "No, yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I don't, but I have a British passport, so I can come in and out freely." He said, "No, you have to get one for you and your family."
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So,
makes life easier. Definitely.
Yeah. So he pushed me to do it and helped me sort of get that all organized. So
amazing.
I have a golden visa, and UK's has its own set of challenges today.
Okay.
So you'll see in the next few weeks, depending on the budget, whether we might be your neighbors in Dubai.
I love that. To have 15 family members working together across generations, I'd love to hear more on how do you do it, guys? I mean, how do you bring in 15 guys together from the family and govern that relationship? And I would love to have a feel from you on the spirit of the relationship. I mean, how does it feel?
So that's an interesting and complicated at the same time question. I'd say my grandfather was the pioneer of the family system that we worked within. So his vision was, a lot of what we talked about earlier on today. It was about how do you keep the individual happy throughout their life. So he said he looked at Maslow's hierarchy. There was a gentleman called Sir Ernest Vasey who he worked very closely with. And Sir Ernest was an orphan. He was a stowaway on a ship to Africa. And Sir Ernest would, every day when he had just come to Africa, he would choose the day's work he did. Did he spend the money on a bed that night or on a meal? So he'd come from this. He met my grandfather, who was all about family. And so Sir Ernest became a part of our family, essentially. He ended up being the governor of the central bank of one of the East African countries. He was quite a prominent chap in business in those days. But he decided towards the later part of his life that what he really loved was our family and the system. So my grandfather and he went around the world. They studied different families. They saw what kept families together.
A long time ago.
That was a long time ago. It was for those days, it was pretty forward thinking.
Yes.
So he studied many families. He said, look, here are the things that break families apart. Here are the things that help them succeed. So he met all the contemporaries of the time. So Rothschilds, Rockefellers, you name them.
He should have written a book, right? Does he? Does he have a book?
He didn't write a book, but he wrote a code of conduct, which is what we carry, which tells you, it has 18 principles, how you should live your life, and the things that are important. So this is a code of conduct which he built certain framework for the family. And he said, look, at the end of this study, he said, the biggest issue for a family is inheritance. And that's where everything starts falling apart. So he said, let's create a system where nobody owns anything. Family owns everything. Everything we do is for the family. And in return, the family looks after you throughout your life.
Okay, amazing. That would be a trust, I would assume.
So it was a trust structure. It was, at the time, it was very thoughtful. It has its challenges now, which we can touch on later. But the idea was, everybody was a potential beneficiary, not necessarily a beneficiary. And with the businesses, you were all working in the businesses. So you generated income from what you did. You looked after some, you started some new ones. You were encouraged to be entrepreneurial. So it was, again, a lot of what you said today resonated because we were taught to be entrepreneurial since we were small.
Okay.
Right?
I would love to understand, how does that work out? I mean, how do you get pushed to the business and then be held responsible, and how did that work?
I think as young as I can remember, I was dragged to meetings with my dad and my uncles. So I didn't know what these guys were talking about. I just sat there like a lemon and absorbed, right? So this was the way it happened in the early days. As I got a bit older, it was, okay, summer holidays, this is what you're doing. You're gonna go load a truck in the south of France with hose pipes. Okay. Or you're gonna go to Sri Lanka and do ledger entries. Those days, computers were still sort of relatively new, so you do the books of accounts, right? Okay. We have a aluminium coil coating business in Switzerland. So you're going to go to Switzerland and you're going to learn the processes in this business. And maybe you should write a little book which explains everything that happens in the business. So the next general manager comes along can have a fast track to understanding the business.
Interesting.
So things like that. So we were constantly being pushed into the business learning.
Is that like haphazard, like they said? Or
very thoughtful.
Very thoughtful, okay.
Very thoughtful. I had an uncle who, I think I was 12 years old when I spent a few weeks over the summer with him. And he said, right, we're going to talk about human values. Okay. Write down the 5 values that matter most. So I said, what's a value? Right, I was 12. I was like, what is value? So he said, things like honesty, integrity, humanity, compassion, all these are values. Now, let's write down 5 that matter and why they matter.
Okay.
Let's define them, and let's study, how do you feel about these values?
Okay.
And what do you need to do to improve these values? And then let's review it. So it was like a very conscious effort to educate the younger generation on
And
values.
an all-rounded fashion.
All-rounded fashion.
And you think that they communicated them amongst themselves so that you achieve that within your
This was actually, I think, the family had this broader philosophy around values, around giving back to society, about creating wealth for us, but understanding that it was a need-based system.
Okay.
And what we create beyond what we need is for communities around us. Okay, I mean, and needs are all relative, so we
Yeah.
all had decent needs. So you made sure you had a nice house,
Yeah.
a decent car, etc., etc. But beyond that, there's a strong emphasis to give back. And we did philanthropy through the businesses. So every business does something for the communities around. It becomes part of their spirit and their culture, and also their values, right?
Okay.
And then we do it on our own, and we also do as a family. So it extends beyond. But that was a conscious way of bringing us up. And then as soon as we graduated, it was, you guys in the deep end, go learn how to run a business.
Okay.
So I was sent out to Kenya.
Oh.
And initially I was supposed to spend some time in a company, existing company, but I was a marketing manager selling batteries and matches around Kenya.
Okay.
So I was driving a pickup truck whilst the marketing guy was away.
Okay.
I was selling these things across the country, which was an experience which would be hard to replicate in a business school. And then after a few months, they said, you know what, we want to start a garment factory in Kenya. And, would you like to do that? So I said, hey, I'm 21. I can't think of anything more fun to do.
Okay.
So I set up a garment factory, and I was producing shorts for Walmart, Target, companies like that. And everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
So it was the best experience of failures and how to overcome them. It was a business school. We call it an MBWA.
Okay.
So management by walking about rather than just sitting in a classroom. So we learned the hard way, all these sort of things, built businesses. Well, I spoke to my uncles. They said, after 6 years of doing this, they said, look, the business is stable now. We're doing more as a family in private equity. Why don't you think about getting some experience in private equity? So I went and worked outside the family in a private equity fund for a couple of years. And it's a fund called Bearing Asia, which has been extremely successful. It's now part of EQT. And that was, again, just an incredible experience. The height of the dot-com boom, crazy valuation.
Yeah.
You can't understand how people value their businesses this way.
I still don't. So.
It was an unreal time. I was sitting in Hong Kong.
Okay.
I was the only guy who didn't speak Chinese, and our whole thing was bringing technology from the Valley to Asia.
Okay, interesting.
So I was the guy every month in the Valley,
Okay,
Silicon Valley, looking at tech investment opportunities.
interesting.
So it was just an awesome experience. So being micro, one business, looking after it, then looking at many deals every day.
Okay.
And so I did that for a bit, and then they said, okay, now you need to come back to a family center. So I came back to Singapore at that point, and they said, Asia's the future, next 10 years is going to be, or 20 years might be Asia.
Okay.
You should come here, and so should all your cousins. So what was happening simultaneously, they were saying, spend time with all your cousins. These are the guys you'll work with in the future.
Okay.
By the way, we'd been doing this every holiday, every summer. When we were not doing jobs, we were hanging out together in our house in Italy.
Okay, interesting.
Consciously, my dad, his cousins, his brothers, and their kids, we would all spend the summer together for 2-3 weeks.
That's
The
so
idea was
valuable.
it brings you together for the future.
Amazing.
So, and the family was spread out between Singapore, Geneva, London, Toronto, and Nairobi. So again, my grandfather very consciously said, too many people in one place, you'll step on each other's toes, and you'll cause issues.
Okay.
Yeah, even where there's no issues and there don't need to be issues, there will be issues. So
Very
he
wise.
said, put 3 people max each city.
Interesting.
So that's how it kind of panned out. So anyway, long story short, I end up in Singapore. At that point, I said, you know, guys, there's nobody in what we call European businesses from the younger generation. So I said, I'm happy to carry your bags for a few years whilst I learn the ropes, and let me help these guys come to Asia. So I spent the next 17 years in Singapore helping build businesses that were decent size but not huge,
Okay.
helping them grow into Asia. Meantime, I started a retail business in Kidzania and a few other things. And then I sold the retail. I said, look, I have a little bit of time. Where shall I spend it? My uncle said, look at this tech business. Come with me for one meeting. So I went for one meeting, and this was a company called UST, which is a digital transformation business. And he said, what do you think? So I said, you know what? I don't know why I'm spending time on anything else. This business is amazing. We got awesome people, great business, just needs a bit of rejigging. We need to bring everyone back together, get a common set of values and purpose going again. But to do that, I need to be hands-on. So I became executive chairman of the business, the only time I took a hands-on day-to-day role. Last 10 years, I built that from under $500 million, under 500 million, to now we're a multi-billion-dollar revenue company,
Amazing.
largest privately owned business in the digital transformation space.
Amazing. Amazing.
So that was the last thing, and now I've just stepped back from that.
Okay.
So now I'm thinking about my next gig, but
Okay. Where is your heart taking you?
right now, my kids are a bit older now, so I have a 25-year-old girl who's decided to go live in Guatemala.
Okay.
I have a 23-year-old girl who, well, young lady, I can't say girl anymore, who's an artist, and she's incredibly talented at what she does. She paints on vintage clothes, on handbags, on things like that. And so all the kids have been saying to me, Papa, you've always done stuff in the business, but you've never spent time with us on our businesses.
Okay.
Now, can you help us do something? So this is the time where I'm going to take, I think, a few months, spend it with them, and do what I was fortunate enough to have people
Yes.
spend time with me, mentor me.
Okay.
So I want to give back to them, help them get started. I've been talking to a few good friends who've done extremely well in their lives. They've said to me 3 bits of advice that I took home. One was have 50 cups of coffee with 50 different people. Try to understand what's happening in the world and get ideas about what you want to do next. Second was don't catch the first bus that comes along.
Okay.
Just wait at the bus stop, watch a few go by, and then decide what you want to do. And the third thing was, do something that you're really passionate about.
Okay.
Till now, I've done stuff that the family wanted me to do, that the
Okay.
family needed me to do, and I was brainwashed to do that.
Okay.
When I joined the family business, there was never a thought of going somewhere else. It just, that idea was never an idea. It was, you were just brainwashed from an early age that you are the future, you need to work in the family business.
You probably do something that I have done that might actually give you some of that. So what we obviously share is that we like to develop stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So I got into the arena of venture studios. Venture studios is basically a small team, highly focused, that develops multiple ventures at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is much to do with dealing with the statistics of failure, really. But then what you really discover in doing so is 80-90% of my money is in big things, and they are probably with you in the family business and all of that. That's great. You'll be probably spending 20-30% of your time looking after some of that. But then 70%, up to 70% of my time, I spend it on those small startups that assume less than 5% of my wealth. But they take 70% of my time. And there's so much fun in doing so.
Yeah.
And you bring in the kids in with you. I'm still keen on understanding how do you communicate? 15 family members in the business. How do you talk?
It's a great question. Communication is, always so important, even in every sort of family unit.
Okay.
Smaller family units, so with your direct family, with your kids, with your wife, communication is at the core of having a healthy relationship. In a large family, it's even more important. And unfortunately, in a large family, you also carry baggage of your father's baggage, your grandfather's baggage, that every line carries its own baggage which you need to manage. So we were very lucky that at every generation, we had somebody who was the glue that kept everyone together, that was a sounding board, that heard everybody, that managed all those issues and helped that communication. So in my grandfather's generation, it was him. In my father's generation, it was him. In our generation, we don't have that.
Okay.
And that's a big gap. And that's caused, I think, some issues even today in our generation. And, it's a standard thing. Everybody knows family businesses are not, it's incredible because family businesses are actually not that complex when you break them down. Everybody knows about succession issues.
Yes.
Everybody knows about the values and the long-term approach, which gives, and the quick decision-making, which are advantages to family business. And everybody knows that human values and frailties, ego, etc., are the other part which make both succession and families running smoothly challenges that. So we have the same issues in our family like every other family. Okay, so in the past, we had a very structured system. We would have a family meeting once a year. Then we'd have a family business meeting once a year or twice a year, depending on the need. And everyone got together, everybody talked about it. But again, whoever was responsible for a specific business would run with that business.
Okay.
They'd take everybody's inputs, advice, etc. But they were responsible, they got on with what they needed to do. That was the system. Today, we're a little bit broken in the communication side. I think a lot more needs to be done. And we have some challenges. We've also got a complex trust structure.
Okay.
Which means, when the family is very united, it's easy with trusts. But when the family is not super united, then the trustees, they all take advantage as well of the situation.
Yes.
So it's there's a lot of complexities we have to navigate in our generation, I think.
And my next question was, how are you managing the next generation involvement into the business?
I'd say the next generation is less motivated compared to us. Like this was the only option for us.
Okay.
But the next generation, they're looking at what are my other options?
Okay.
Which is not a good situation. They should have been thinking, no, the family's the only option.
Is that because they were not involved earlier on?
Well, I think one, they probably saw the writing on the wall.
Okay.
And they probably said, you know what, this is not as rosy as it seems to be, right?
Got it.
So I'd say that was one of the challenges. I'd say the other is, we've always brought our children up to be passionate about what they do.
Okay.
So, my one daughter's an artist.
Okay.
Now, historically, what we would have done in the family is we would have said, well, first, girls are not allowed to work in the family business, which is a whole nother issue.
Seriously?
Whole nother issue, right?
Is that like a constitution that cannot be changed?
Yeah, it was a constitution that could be changed. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but, in the future. But until, when I was growing up, it was just, that was not an option.
Okay.
And so my sister, etc., they've all got, chips on their shoulders about never having had that opportunity. And personally, I don't think it's the right thing either.
Of course. Yeah.
But so for the girls, they never thought about it. They just assumed that we're going to have to work outside, so it's never going to be an option. But also, historically, what would have happened, let's say it wasn't a daughter, but it was a son, and my son came along and said, hey, I'm an artist. And we all said, hey, wow, you're really talented. We would have built a business for him around his talent.
Okay, got it.
So we would have said, hey, let's go, let's build a brand, we'll do it together.
Interesting.
Now, and the family would have backed him to do it.
Okay.
So that's how we would accommodate those passions.
Okay.
But in today's environment, I think, he's not an artist, but he has other ideas. He wants to do things and he wants to be bigger and better than the family. So, he's only 17, so he's got plenty of time to go. So it's every generation, perhaps is a little different. I don't want anyone to feel like they had no choice.
Okay.
I want my kids to feel like they have a choice.
Okay.
And then if the business is a real choice, then the business can decide. If the business is not a real choice and they want to do something else because that's what they're passionate about, then we'll encourage them to do that.
So if you have a time machine where you can change a couple of events in the history of the family, you can change a couple of things, where would you go and what would you change?
That's an incredibly complicated but amazing question. A few people in a family that are that glue, like I mentioned, right? And even in smaller subunits of the family, there are those people who are the glue. Somehow you have to find a way in every family to make sure there's a succession plan for that glue.
Okay.
So the broader succession plan is anyway an issue that everybody talks about, right? Everyone talks about, but no one ever seems to get it right.
Okay, got it.
But beyond that, the second issue is that glue, that communication glue.
So I always say, the next guy to take over the business does not necessarily need to be the smartest or the most savvy in business, but an individual with communication skills
Yeah.
whereby everybody buys into his or her story, basically. So I call it that guy, which you call the glue, basically.
The glue. I call them either the glue or the sponge.
Okay.
Because they're both.
Yeah, they are.
They keep everyone together, but they absorb all the shit.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
So they're the person who sucks up all the pain,
Okay.
and they spit out the compassion and the goodwill for the family.
Okay.
So now nobody thinks about succession planning for those guys.
Yes.
And they may not be the business leader, they're the people who matter. And
Amazing.
so I would say that would be, if I have to go back, I would have made sure in every time there was one of those. And a succession for that. And the other thing I would have done, I think you alluded to this earlier, there has to be a mechanism when people are unhappy that they can get out.
Yes.
Because if that mechanism doesn't exist, it's like a cancer.
Yes.
You keep people who don't want to be there.
Yes, yes.
They start to eat in.
They force the relationship rather than...
Yeah. And then you're all stuck together and it's like, where do you go? So I would say that would be the second thing I would have done.
Amazing. I definitely can take this session to hours. And probably we'll have to do... I would foresee another 2 sessions, but probably a word of wisdom.
Everything that I've tried to do and where I've been most successful has always been built around people and values and a longer term vision for something bigger and better than profit. I would say if you can have that driving you and be fair in the way you build it and stick to those values, then, the sky's the limit.
Thank you so much. This sits very well in the heart of what I always advocate for also. So I truly appreciate your time in here, and I'll need your permission to have another 2 sessions with you about different subjects. So
Absolutely.
again, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.